the same standards apply. It doesn't matter if it's Israel or Hamas or any other armed group, whether that be in Tigray. So, you know, whether or not we have Brazil in person in Nairobi, it is symbolic. It's all about the institutions. I mean, what we've been saying is the human rights system is under threat. It isn't, and that's the difference, right? Is it under threat or is it broken?
The condemnation of the attacks of the Hamas were really clear for many countries, and then there were from the EU and the US less.
For access to humanitarian assistance, for example, and access to things like fuel and water to the civilian population in Gaza. So there has been some softening. Those initial comments and that sort of selective outrage.
New this year, I mean, what is more worrying this year that you think is a new trend? I mean, should the Israeli government, as a legitimate government, elected government in a democracy, which is supposed to
So 2023 was an incredibly challenging year for human rights. We saw several patterns that saw the erosion of human rights in many respects. First of all, we saw that even in thriving democracies, there were increasing attacks on the institutions that we rely on to promote thriving open societies that can provide human rights for everyone. We've seen horrific abuses taking place in situations of armed conflict. Of course, what is grabbing all of our attention right now is the situation in Israel and Gaza, Ukraine, but there are also conflicts like Sudan who are not capturing the international attention. Not on top of that, there's the situation in Ethiopia and the conflict in Myanmar. And one of the things that has defined 2023 is the application of selective outrage. This is a question of hypocrisy. What we are seeing when Western states and European members of the EU turn a blind eye to human rights abuses, either domestically or internationally, just to advance their own agenda, that is nothing short of hypocrisy. These are political choices, but they are also choices of whether countries lean in to wanting to actually live and realize their human rights obligations. Double standard has been noticed by the Global South, and it is having a corrosive effect on the international institutions that we rely on to protect human rights. It's being weaponized by actors such as China and Russia, who are using the application of the double standard to actually say to countries, you see, these institutions are not for us. Human rights don't apply for everyone. And that is not true. That is a tool that these countries are using because they don't want to have the checks and balances that that institutions like the United Nations and the UN Security Council will provide. Fundamentally important, if we take any lesson away from 2023, it's that human rights will only survive if there is the even application of the moral authority of those rights. The Israeli authorities, in the aftermath of the brutal attacks on October 7th, cut off water, fuel, electricity, and life-saving humanitarian assistance, including medical supplies. And this sort of collective punishment of the whole population, that amounts to a war crime. The human rights system still exists and is very clear. The only thing that we are lacking is the commitment, the consistency, and the political will of the states that make up that system and bring human rights to life.